When I was 13, I went into a well-known haunted house with a tour group. There was a known child activity there, so I took a light-up toy to try and interact with the spirits. It didn't take long before I started connecting with a child spirit. I told my mom before I left that I felt sorry for the spirit and wished I could take them out of the house because I didn't like that they were stuck there. I went on with my life. Strange things would happen sometimes, things I couldn't explain, but it was never anything big. When I turned 19, I got my first real job at a care facility. In the first 2 years there, nothing unusual happened. Then one night, while goofing off with a coworker, I randomly started singing, "I'm a Little Teapot." I didn't finish the song, but a little girl's voice did, loud and clear. Both my coworker and I heard it. After that, the little girl became very active. We'd hear her playing in the hallway. A few times we even saw her. And it wasn't just me or the coworker who'd been there that night. At least 4 other staff members had seen her too. Later, I moved to a different job at a nursing home and didn't think much about the little girl anymore. There was one resident who always seemed to talk to someone invisible whenever I was in her room. Other staff said she only did that when I was around. One day, the resident told me it was so nice of me to bring my little sister to work. I started getting curious and asked her questions. She described the girl exactly like the ghost child I'd seen at my last job. That night, I called my old coworkers and asked if anything strange had happened lately. They said things had been quiet. Later that night, I woke up to find my dog, who never acted aggressively, standing protectively over me, staring at my open bedroom door. And there she was, the little girl, clear as day. Before, I had only caught glimpses of her. But now, she looked completely real, like an actual child standing in my doorway. She smiled at me, giggled, then ran off. I jumped out of bed to see where she went, but there was no sign of her. I knew it couldn't have been a random kid who got into my apartment. No one else was there, and there was no way out without me noticing. The place was small, but big enough that if she'd run to the door, I would have seen her. For the next 3 years, the same resident kept having conversations with my sister. A few other residents also mentioned her. I never interacted with the spirit, I just let her be. Sometimes she'd let me know she was around by flickering lights. Her favorite thing was playing with water. But overall, I just lived my life even though I knew she was still there. When I left the nursing home, I made one request. I asked her to stay with the woman who had first seen her. That woman had no family and was always so lonely, but always happy when she saw my sister. I don't know if it worked. I never asked my old coworkers if she stayed. But I stopped noticing the things the little girl used to do. When I was 25, I ended up in a bad relationship, got pregnant, and moved back in with my parents. My parents have 2 homes, and honestly, both could be considered haunted. My dad is very sensitive to spirits and always makes a deal with them. He won't kick them out as long as they don't harm anyone. The house I grew up in has the spirit of an old farmer who has only shown up a couple of times. The other house, which my parents remodeled, has a woman's spirit who once babysat my dad. She's very active, but not in a bad way, just makes her presence known. Anyway, I moved back into my childhood home. The activity there was almost nothing, until I had my son. I started noticing the same little things the girl used to do. My baby would watch something move around him even when nothing was there. As he got older, the activity started to fade, so I didn't think much of it. I figured maybe a family member was just stopping by to say hello. When my son was 2, I got a job at a daycare. The daycare used to be a funeral home and had activity from the start. It got so bad that one of the bosses had the place smudged. But not everything is left. I worked in the baby room. There was a toy there that would sing when touched. It was one of my favorites, and I used it to play with the babies almost every day, until it started singing on its own. It went off multiple times a day and it was getting annoying. So we opened the back to check the batteries, only to find there were never any batteries in it at all. My coworker quickly put the toy away and we didn't talk about it again. But other coworkers kept mentioning strange things they experienced too. One thing always stuck with me, the water in the room my son was in would randomly turn on. And that toy? It only sang when I was around. I left the daycare for a short time to help a friend with their restaurant, but my son stayed in the same daycare. One day his teacher told me that he and another little boy had become close, but they didn't play with any other kids. They always mentioned the same name. The teacher asked me if there was a show with a character named Ina. I had never heard of one. We all kind of forgot about it. A year later, I went back to work at the daycare. I wasn't in the baby room anymore. I was now a preschool teacher assistant. I noticed my son still played alone. When I asked him why, he said he wasn't alone. Ina played with him. I figured she was just an imaginary friend. The name felt familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. Another year passed. Now, my son was in my class. I had moved from assistant to lead teacher. I was having problems with a coworker who worked in a room downstairs. One night after she had left, I heard someone down in her room. I went to check and make sure no child had been left behind. It all started a bit over a year ago, I think around December 19th of 2016. I was woken up by my younger brother, let's call him Cameron to keep things private, begging me to get down from my wooden bunk bed. He said his legs were hurting, and at that time we had no idea why. Before I go any further, you should understand the layout of the house. Right outside my room, there's a short hallway that leads to the garage and my bathroom. That hallway also connects to the kitchen, which links to both the living room and dining area. From there, it leads into a longer hallway where the rest of my family's bedrooms are. Try to keep this in mind, it'll matter later. Even though a little light was coming in from outside, it wasn't enough to brighten the house. Everything had a strange, uneasy feeling to it. I got out of bed to check on Cameron. He was sitting on my wooden frame on the bottom bunk, staring toward my closet. As I climbed down the ladder, he looked over at me and all the color vanished from his face. "Run!" Cameron shouted, darting out of the room. I didn't know what had scared him so badly, but I didn't hesitate. I took off after him. We rushed into his bedroom. After we shut the door, I asked him what was going on and why he looked so terrified. After a minute of catching his breath, he finally explained. When he turned around earlier, he saw a dark shape about my size crawling across my bed. That's when I suddenly remembered. My little sister, let's call her Ava, was sleeping in the living room. I ran over to check on her. She was still sound asleep, thank goodness. Whatever had been in my room hadn't reached her yet. But before I could wake her up, I heard it, the sound of bare feet softly tapping against the tile floor. And it was coming from my hallway. Our 2 cats were in the living room and I was pretty sure both of our parents were still asleep. I shook Ava awake and quickly brought her to Cameron's room. After getting them both inside safely and shutting the door, I ran to my parents' room. They were both in bed. I woke my dad and told him I thought some kid had gotten into the house. But he didn't believe me, he told me to let him sleep. Looking back, I can't really blame him. This wasn't the first time I'd gotten scared and told him something only to find out I was just being nervous. So I left and stayed in Cameron's room with him and Ava until morning. The rest of the day went by like normal. The second time I saw that thing was on June 4th of 2017. I had just arrived at my dad's place to spend the summer break. While I was unpacking, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. It was moving quickly down the hallway, almost like it was speed walking. It went by so fast I could barely see anything clearly. The only thing I remember for sure were its hands, pale, white hands, lit up by the light coming from the kitchen. The hallway light was off. Judging by how close those hands were to the floor, whatever it was stood about as tall as me. That didn't feel right, I thought to myself. I switched on the hallway light and checked everything. The bathroom light was off, the door stood open, and nobody was inside. The garage door always made a loud creaking sound whenever it opened, but I hadn't heard anything. There was no way someone could have gone through without making a sound. Feeling more uneasy, I headed into the living room and saw Ava sitting there on her tablet. I asked her where Cameron and our parents were. She told me they were all in their rooms. I checked and she was right. Everyone was where they usually were. And still, that hallway was completely empty. I thought maybe that was the end of it. But when I talked to Cameron, I realized I was very wrong. He told me, dead serious, no smile, that he sometimes sees it in the corner of his eye. Usually, it's walking fast past the door frame of whichever room he's in. Once it happened while he was in his own room. Another time in Ava's room. And once even while he sat in the dining room. But the scariest moment of all was when he saw it inside his closet, just standing there. This time, it wasn't in the corner of his eye, it was right in front of him, in the light. Cameron said it stayed frozen in that spot for almost a full minute before it just vanished, like it melted into thin air. He described it to me clearly. It had a black body, a brown head with no face, about the same size as me, and white hands. When he said that, it made my skin crawl. I had told him that I'd seen something walking fast down my hallway, but I never said anything about the white hands. Out of everyone, I guess I've had the most recent run-in with this thing, or at least I think I have. Just a few days ago, on March 7, 2018, right at the start of spring break, I was in the bathroom brushing my teeth and watching videos on YouTube. That's when I suddenly heard a loud, angry growling sound. It sounded like a furious wild dog, but deeper and more evil, like something out of a nightmare. I couldn't tell if it was coming from outside the window or from just around the corner of the hallway. Trying to calm myself, I rewound the video about 12 seconds, but the growl didn't come again. That meant it wasn't from the video. It had been real. Call me foolish if you want, but I grabbed a broom from the other side of the sink and stepped into the hallway. I wasn't going to wait around for whatever this thing was. I quickly shoved the broomstick out around the corner, but no one was there. Even so, deep down, I knew. It was that same thing again, the one that's been following us. For a long time, I've believed that what we're dealing with might be a shadow person. They're similar to ghosts in many ways, at least that's what I think. The biggest difference is how they look. Ghosts often have faces or shapes you can recognize, but shadow people are just dark shapes. Usually they appear as one solid color, most often black, though sometimes they can be other shades too. They don't have faces, and that matches what we've seen. But here's the thing that keeps bothering me. Why is something like this even in our house? Our home only had one owner before us, and he lived there alone. There's no known reason for anything paranormal to be happening here. There's a reason this story has the name it does, and I guess it's time I stopped dancing around it. If you've been following everything carefully, then you've probably picked up on it. This thing is about the same height as me. Maybe exactly. It's been showing up for a little over 12 months, and shadow people aren't supposed to grow. Unless it's trying to become me. Maybe it's copying me, trying to look like me for some reason. But why would it do that? As I said earlier, it's shown itself to Cameron more than anyone else. So what if it's trying to fool him? What if it wants him to think it's me? That idea sends a chill down my spine. I don't like thinking about it, but I can't ignore it either. I really hope it's not pretending to be me so it can make him feel safe, and then do something terrible. I've already warned Cameron that this could be happening. I just hope he believes me and takes it seriously. Before I wrap this up, there's one last thing I want to mention, something I now think might have been the very first time I saw it. I can't be completely sure though, since maybe I misunderstood what happened. But it was one night, probably way back in 2014, when I heard footsteps in the kitchen. I sat up in bed as the sound moved toward my room. I called out, "Dad?" but got no reply. I switched on my flashlight and saw what looked like my dad's shadow walking past my doorway. But here's the strange part, I never heard the garage door open. That door is loud. The next day, I asked my dad if he had gone into the kitchen around midnight. He said he had been awake around that time, but he had gone outside through the sliding glass door in the living room and never stepped into the kitchen at all. Something is here with us, and I plan to figure out what it wants, before it's too late. The story begins with my older brother Shane and my younger cousins, Loren and Justin. We were left alone for the night at my grandmother's house. All the adults had gone to a nearby relative's home for dinner. Since we were the oldest kids there, we wanted to do our own thing. We decided to take a walk to a nearby pond and try some late-night fishing. The pond we liked was close to a cliff, and the trail that led there went through a wooded area. It was also near a cliff wall. As we got closer to the pond, my cousin Loren started talking about a game he plays with his friend at night where they try to summon a skinwalker. He explained how they would whistle at night or say the Navajo word for skinwalker 4 times. Then Loren began teasing me, Shane, and Justin, saying we weren't brave enough to play the game. Me, being the fearless cousin and always ready to prove Loren wrong, found a big rock to stand on. I stood with my back facing the trees and started yelling out the word for skinwalker 4 times. After the 4th time, we heard a whistle. Right then, I knew I had messed up. I knew that whistle didn't come from a person. It belonged to a skinwalker. The thing about a skinwalker's whistle is that it sends chills down your spine. It makes your whole body freeze. Every hair on your body stands straight up. We all turned to look toward the woods. It wasn't a thick forest, and beyond the trees was a tall cliff wall. We searched the area trying to find where the whistle came from. Then we saw it. It came from the top of the cliff. A man was standing up there. He looked average in height and very skinny. His skin was a pale gray color with black markings, like corpse paint. His hair was messy and his eyes were a bright, dirty yellow. He stared straight at us. At that moment, we were frozen in fear. All we could do was stand there and stare back. He then knelt down and slowly placed his hand on the edge of the cliff. After that, he began to climb down. His head was facing toward the ground as he crawled down the cliff using all 4 limbs. The best way to explain it is like how Spider-Man climbs down the side of a building. When he finally reached the bottom, that's when we took off running back to the house. As we were running, we could hear an extra set of footsteps behind us. The sound kept moving, first to the right side of us, then to the left, then right behind us again. Curiosity got the best of me and I looked back. That's when I saw it. A coyote was chasing us. Then I remembered something my mother once told me. Never look a skinwalker in the eyes. If you do, you could get very sick, or worse. So I quickly turned my head forward and kept running. We finally reached my grandmother's house. We rushed inside and locked the door. None of us dared to look out the windows. As we tried to calm down, we sat in the living room together. Then, out of nowhere, we heard tapping on the living room window. We all jumped up and looked. Even though the curtains were closed, we could still see the eyes glowing through the fabric. Those eyes were staring right at us. Then the tapping stopped and the skinwalker moved away from the window. The moment its eyes disappeared, there was a loud bang above us. Footsteps started running across the roof. It pounded on the roof hard, over and over, as if trying to scare us. We huddled together, keeping our heads down close to the floor. The banging grew louder and more violent. And then, just like that, it stopped. I don't remember what happened after that. I only remember waking up on the floor with my brother and my 2 cousins in the living room. When I was fully awake, I stepped outside and looked around. I saw tracks around the house. These weren't animal tracks. They belonged to someone barefoot. I followed them for a bit and they led back into the woods. That's when I gave up and turned away, glancing once more at the trees. Even after everything that happened, I still walked to the pond at night and fish. I was always told not to let people, or things like that, ruin the way you live your life. That kind of fear is exactly what they want. That's why I keep doing what I've always done. Thanks for listening to my story. I have many more stories about skinwalkers and other strange creatures. I'd love to share them if people want to hear more. I travel a lot for work. Small towns, highways, nothing glamorous. Just a steady rotation of budget motels, bad coffee, and late-night radio. I'm used to being alone. Used to be quiet. Used to weird. But this was something else. It happened in Arizona last year. I was driving from Flagstaff to a client site near the border. I'd left late and ended up driving into the night. Around 10:30 p.m., I saw a glowing neon sign on the side of the road, Sunset Pines Motel, vacancy. It wasn't listed on my map, but I was tired and it looked decent enough. 1 story, flat roof, a row of dim yellow lights running under the overhang. There were maybe 3 cars parked out front. The front desk was inside a small office next to room 1. A woman, probably mid-40s, handed me a metal key attached to a green plastic tag that said room 7. I asked, "Do you take cards?" She smiled like I'd asked something strange and said, "Cash only." I paid and went to my room. Room 7 was clean. Mostly. Outdated carpet, a bed with stiff white sheets, a mini fridge humming loudly in the corner. I was too tired to care. I threw my bag on the chair, washed up, and got into bed. Just before I fell asleep, I heard footsteps outside. Slow. Crunching gravel. Then a knock. 3 soft knocks. Not on my door, on the door next to mine. Room 6. I waited. No one answered. The footsteps moved on. I don't know why, but a chill ran through me. I tried to sleep again. At around 1:10 a.m. I woke up. My room was freezing. The heater was on, but I could see my breath. I sat up, confused. The air smelled wrong, like wet soil and rust. I turned on the light. The walls were covered in condensation, like someone had been boiling water inside the room for hours. My phone was dead even though I'd plugged it in. Then I heard it, scraping. Something was dragging across the carpet. From under the bed. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then, slowly, a shadow stretched out across the floor. A long, thin hand, grayish bone-like, reached out from under the bed. I couldn't even scream. I just grabbed my keys, opened the door, and ran barefoot to my car. I didn't look back. I jumped into the driver's seat and peeled out of the lot. The motel faded behind me in the rearview mirror. Just a line of flickering lights shrinking into the desert. I drove for maybe 20 minutes. Didn't stop. Didn't check my phone. Just kept going. And then, I saw it again. The same glowing sign. Sunset Pines Motel, vacancy. I slammed on the brakes. It was identical. Same building. Same gravel lot. The same number of cars. I drove past slowly, heart pounding. Room 7's curtain was open. The lights were on, and I saw myself inside, lying on the bed, sleeping. I floored it. Tires kicked gravel and dust into the air as I sped down the highway. No way. No chance. This wasn't happening. I drove for hours, until the sky began to lighten. Until I found a small diner just outside a town I'd never heard of. I parked in the back lot, walked inside, and collapsed into a booth. The waitress poured me coffee without asking. I must have looked like I'd seen a ghost. I asked her if she knew the Sunset Pines Motel. She frowned. That place burned down years ago. Caught fire in room 7. The man died inside. Never did rebuild. I stared at her, my throat dry. Where is it? I asked. She pointed east. 5 miles down. The same direction I'd just come from. I sat in silence for a long time. When I finally worked up the courage, I drove back toward where I thought I'd find the ruins. But the motel wasn't there. Not a trace. Just a flat desert. I checked my phone. It had power again. Full bars. But when I looked at my photos, the last one I'd taken, the picture of the room key, was gone. No receipt. No reservation. No record I'd ever stayed there. To this day, I don't know what happened that night. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe I hallucinated. But sometimes, when I drive at night on lonely roads, I still see flashes of yellow light in the trees. Sometimes I hear gravel shifting under invisible footsteps. And sometimes I wake up in unfamiliar places. Like I never really left room 7. Like I'm still lying there. Still asleep. Still dreaming. Back in 2010, my son was almost 3 years old. I had recently gotten married and was living in the basement of my in-laws' house while we were looking for a place to buy. My son's room was just a few steps down the hallway, maybe about 20 feet from our bedroom door. One night, around midnight, my husband and I were lying in bed, just about to sleep, when my son suddenly ran into the room. He looked terrified and was crying uncontrollably. He jumped onto the bed and started yelling that there was a dead man under his bed. I didn't know what to think. He was so young and had never been exposed to anything about death before, so hearing him say that really shocked me. We held him and tried to calm him down, and after about 25 minutes, he finally fell asleep again. The next morning, I decided to take him back to his room to show him there was nothing scary there. I walked in first, checked all the corners, even under the bed, and told him, "See? No scary people here." He slowly walked to the doorway, bent down, pointed under the bed, and said, "No, the dead man is under there. He's scary." That was enough for me. I shut the door and avoided that room for a few days. After a while, he started sleeping there again, though he'd still sometimes say the dead man was back. We finally bought and moved into our first house a few months later, in February of 2011. For a long time, he didn't mention the dead man again. I felt relieved and thought whatever it was had passed. But then one night he wouldn't go to sleep. He kept saying he was scared of the dead man standing in his closet. After that, it became something he talked about nearly every day. Sometimes the man was in the closet. Sometimes he floated near the ceiling above the bed. Other times he would be outside the window tapping on the glass. My son hadn't even turned 4 yet. We taught him how to stand up for himself. We told him that if the scary man ever came again, he should say loudly, "This is my house and you're not allowed here." One afternoon, it was just the two of us at home. He was in his room playing while I was in the kitchen making lunch. Suddenly, I heard him shout, "This is my house and you need to go away." I froze. My heart dropped. I ran to his room and asked if he was all right. He smiled proudly and said, "I made him leave." If only that had been the end. This went on for about another year. Sometimes things would stay calm for a few days, maybe even a few weeks, but then the scary man would return. I asked my son to describe what the man looked like. He said it was just the top half of a man, he could only see from the chest up. The rest was all shadows, and where the eyes should have been, there were just deep black holes. He even drew pictures of stick figures surrounded by darkness, with black circles for eyes. It was honestly disturbing. One day I shared what we had been going through with a coworker. She told someone she knew who worked with a paranormal team. Not long after, that person came up to me and asked if I would be okay with them visiting our house to check things out and try to help. I agreed, and they came over a few weeks later. They spent almost an hour in my son's room, trying to connect with the scary man. In the end, they believed they had made contact with something, a spirit that wasn't angry or evil, just neutral. They didn't think it was dangerous, but they also didn't trust it completely. They said it seemed more curious than anything, maybe even lonely. And they believed this spirit was connected to my son, not to the house. They even said it was possible that my son might be a medium. After they left, everything felt calm again, for about a week. But then it got worse. Now it wasn't just the scary man. My son started talking about more of them. I had hoped this wouldn't happen, but deep down I knew it was possible. Still, it was incredibly frustrating. I felt like we had tried everything. Salt sprays, politely asking them to go, cleansing rituals, even getting the house blessed. One afternoon when I was home by myself, I sat quietly and kept repeating one thing, asking them all to leave. I told them they weren't welcome and that we were tired of it. It had been almost 4 years now. And even though I never felt truly unsafe in the house, it bothered me deeply that my son was still so afraid. That night he said they were still around. I went to bed feeling exhausted and hopeless. That's when I had a dream. A very clear, detailed dream. I was lying in bed and I saw a man in my closet. Just like my son had described, only visible from the chest up, with black empty holes where his eyes should have been. He said, "I'm the one your son sees. I'm not trying to hurt him. I'm just alone, and he can see me." I looked at him and said, "I know who you are, but you're not welcome here. You scare my son. You need to leave and never come back." Right then he disappeared. I sat up in bed, fully awake. I stared at the closet, heart pounding, but it was empty. I never told my son about this dream, not until he turned 13. But from that night on, he never once mentioned the scary man again. And none of the others ever came back either. This happened around 7 years ago when I was 15. My sister Jackie was just turning 12 and was celebrating with a sleepover with her two closest friends, Macy and Kenzie. Since I was the older sister, I thought it would be fun to play some pranks on them while they were watching movies in the dark living room. I started by making ghost sounds from around the corner and tossing little things at them from my hiding spot. After a while, we all laughed and ended up sitting around telling ghost stories. That's the whole point of a sleepover anyway. We spent the next half hour or so sitting on the floor in a circle, holding a flashlight under our chins, telling creepy stories one after the other. When it was Macy's turn again, she asked if we had ever heard of Bloody Mary. Jackie and Kenzie shook their heads, but I knew all about it. Macy explained how the game worked, and I could see right away that Jackie and Kenzie were excited to try it. I figured I'd have a little more fun by creeping them out first. I told them about when I had turned 12, and how I had a sleepover that year too, where we had tried calling Bloody Mary. Honestly, nothing had happened back then and we just laughed it off, but I made up all kinds of spooky things just to scare them. They didn't totally believe me, but they were still eager to try it themselves. So we all went into the bathroom. There were no windows, so it was really dark in there. I turned on the flashlight and placed it standing upright on the floor next to the sink. That way, it wouldn't shine straight into our eyes but still gave us enough light to see our faces in the mirror. As planned, they stood behind me while calling for Bloody Mary. I had thought about chanting, "Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary," and then pretending to fall into a trance or something spooky. But after I finished saying her name, I just stood there, staring into the mirror. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Suddenly, I was sure I saw the shadow of someone standing behind my sister on my left side. I knew it wasn't a regular shadow on the wall. I could feel that it was a real shape. As I kept watching, it looked like the shadow was slowly growing taller. I just stared at it for what felt like 8 minutes, though it was probably only 8 seconds. Macy and Kenzie, who were on my right, started to whisper nervously and asked if I could see anything. That's when I realized none of them saw what I was seeing. I turned to Jackie and asked, "Do you see that?" She panicked, flipped on the bathroom light, and we all ran screaming into the hallway. They all said they didn't see anything and teased me for trying to scare them again, which honestly was fair. To this day I still don't really know what I saw, but I'm certain it wasn't any of our shadows. I've never seen anything like it again, but ever since that night I can't stand being in a bathroom or any room with a mirror when the lights are off.